The embers in the great hearth cast long shadows across Ravenhold Castle's banquet hall, where Lord Julian Burwick surveyed the feast with narrowed eyes. Servants scurried between tables, balancing trays laden with meagre offerings, thin stews, small portions of salt pork, and bread that showed signs of mold carefully cut away. The castle's nobles ate without complaint, though Julian noted the tight expressions of his father's advisers as they pushed the unappetizing fare around their trenchers. "The stores continue to dwindle, my lord," Steward Morris whispered at Julian's side. "We cannot feed the court much longer on what remains." Julian nodded grimly. At 26, he hadn't expected to shoulder the burden of Ravenhold so soon, but his father's wasting illness had thrust him into leadership. The winter had been cruel, first taking the harvest with early frost, then taking his father's strength, leaving Julian to manage both the castle's diminishing supplies and the hungry villages under Ravenhold's protection. "What of the hunting parties?" Julian asked, his voice low. "The forests yield little, my lord. The deer have moved north, and smaller game grows scarce." Julian's fingers tightened around his goblet. "And the neighboring estates? Lord Haverford refuses further aid without concessions." Julian understood the unspoken implication. Lord Haverford had a daughter of marriageable age, plain-faced but dowered with fertile lands. A strategic marriage would solve Ravenhold's immediate troubles, but Julian had resisted such arrangements, much to his adviser's dismay. "I'll consider our options," Julian said dismissively, rising from his seat. The great hall felt suddenly stifling, the complaints and quiet conversations pressing against him like physical weight. "Continue serving what we have. Ensure the village children receive their portion." Outside, the night air bit through Julian's tunic as he walked the battlements. Stars pierced the moonless sky, offering cold comfort to a young lord with too many responsibilities and too few solutions. From this height, the surrounding countryside lay in darkness, farmlands dormant under winter's grip. His people were hungry, and he had no answers. His solitude was broken by approaching footsteps, the distinctive gait of Brother Thomas, the castle's aging monk and keeper of records. "The hour grows late, my lord," Brother Thomas said, pulling his robes tighter against the chill. "You should not bear your burdens alone in the darkness." Julian managed a weary smile. "The darkness is honest, at least. It doesn't pretend that spring is coming." "All winters end, Lord Julian," the monk replied. "Even the longest ones. Not before people starve." Julian's voice hardened. "The village headman came today. 2 children died last week, a boy of 4 and his infant sister." Brother Thomas bowed his head. "May God receive their innocent souls." "God should have preserved their lives," Julian snapped, then sighed. "Forgive me, brother. My faith wavers when children die of hunger while I sleep beneath firs in a stone keep." The monk studied Julian's face in silence before speaking. "There are stories about Ravenhold that few remember," he said carefully. "Tales passed among the brothers of my order. Tales won't fill empty bellies. Perhaps. But in times past, Ravenhold survived privations that destroyed other keeps." Brother Thomas glanced around as if concerned about being overheard. "The chronicles speak of hidden chambers beneath the castle, places from the days of your great-grandfather." Julian frowned. "The storage cellars? We've entered them already." "Not the known cellars, my lord. Something deeper. Something forgotten." Before Julian could press for details, a guard approached, requesting his presence at the gatehouse. A traveler had arrived, unusual at this late hour and in such bitter weather. Julian followed, his curiosity momentarily displacing his troubles. At the gatehouse, a slender figure stood dripping melted snow onto the flagstones. The traveler pushed back a sodden hood, revealing a young woman with keen eyes and frost-pale cheeks. "Lord Burwick," she said, performing a graceless curtsy. "I am Thea Atwood. I've come from the Abbey at Northcross." Julian studied her with suspicion. "The Abbey is 3 days' ride in good weather. What brings you to Ravenhold in winter's heart?" "I was sent by the abbess." Her voice carried unusual authority for one so young. I have training in herbcraft and kitchen management. Word reached us of your difficulties. Julian's pride bristled. We've not asked for charity. It's not charity I offer, but service, she replied evenly. The abbess believes I may be of use here. She also believes that Ravenhold harbors secrets that might sustain you through this famine. Julian exchanged glances with Brother Thomas, whose expression had grown thoughtful. What secrets could a remote abbey know of Ravenhold? Thea Atwood straightened. Despite her travel-worn appearance, dignity cloaked her like a second mantle. Your great-grandmother was a daughter of Northcross before her marriage. She maintained correspondence with the abbey until her death. Some of her letters contained 8 instructions. For times of great need. Brother Thomas stepped forward. The chronicles I mentioned, my lord, they align with what Mistress Atwood suggests. Julian hesitated, weighing his options. The castle already strained to feed its current inhabitants, yet turning away someone with potential knowledge seemed foolish. And there was something in Thea Atwood's steady gaze that compelled trust. You may stay the night, he finally decided. We'll discuss these instructions in the morning. The woman nodded, seemingly unsurprised by his caution. Thank you, my lord. I require little, just a dry corner and perhaps access to your kitchens. I've brought some dried herbs that might improve tomorrow's broth. As a servant led her away, Julian turned to Brother Thomas. Do you believe her claims? The monk clasped his hands thoughtfully. The abbeys keep many records we do not. And your great-grandmother was known for her wisdom in managing the castle's resources. He paused. It would do no harm to hear what Mistress Atwood has to say. That night, Julian slept fitfully, his dreams filled with winding stone passages and the cries of hungry children. He woke before dawn, the castle still silent around him. Restless, he dressed and made his way toward the kitchens, drawn by the unexpected scent of baking bread. The kitchen was normally a place of grim efficiency, but this morning a different atmosphere greeted him. Thea Atwood stood at a work table, sleeves rolled to her elbows as she kneaded dough. Several kitchen servants watched her with expressions ranging from skepticism to curiosity. You've started early, Mistress Atwood, Julian observed. She looked up, unsurprised by his presence. The day's work begins before the sun, my lord. Especially in lean times. We've little flour to spare for bread. This requires less than you'd think. She gestured toward a mixture nearby. Acorn flour, ground and soaked to remove the bitterness, combined with what wheat you have left. It stretches the stores while providing sustenance. Julian approached, examining the dough with skepticism. Acorns are fodder for pigs, not people. When properly prepared, they nourish as well as wheat, Thea replied evenly. The northern tribes rely on them when grain fails, as do the sisters at Northcross during hard winters. And you learned this at the abbey. Something flickered across her face, a hesitation so brief he might have imagined it. Among other things. The abbess believes knowledge is the greatest treasure the sisters can collect. Julian watched as she shaped the dough with practiced movements. Her hands were not those of a cloistered woman, they bore the calluses of someone familiar with labor, though her speech marked her as educated. Tell me about these instructions my great-grandmother left, he said. Thea glanced at the kitchen servant still lingering nearby. Perhaps after the morning meal, my lord? Some matters are best discussed with fewer ears present. Julian nodded, his curiosity heightened by her caution. I'll send for you when I've broken my fast. The bread, when served that morning, proved surprisingly palatable, dense but flavorful, with a nutty taste that disguised its humble origins. Julian noted how the servants took second portions, something that hadn't happened in weeks. As promised, he summoned Thea to his father's study afterward. The small chamber was one of the few places in Ravenhold where private conversations could be assured. Brother Thomas joined them, bringing several ancient ledgers. Now, Julian said once the door was closed, explain what brought you here in winter, with tales of secret instructions. Thea met his gaze steadily. Lady Eleanor Burwick, your great-grandmother, came to her marriage from Northcross Abbey, where she had been educated. Though she left the religious life, she maintained correspondence with the abbess until her death 30 years ago. "This much I know," Julian said impatiently. "What you may not know is that Lady Eleanor designed certain improvements to Ravenhold after the Great Famine during her early years here." Thea's voice lowered. "Including chambers beneath the castle that few knew about, chambers designed to preserve food and grow certain plants even in deepest winter." Julian leaned forward. "If such chambers existed, they would be known to the castle staff." "Not if their existence was deliberately concealed," Brother Thomas interjected, opening one of his ledgers. "I found this entry from the time of your great-grandfather's rule." He turned the book toward Julian, pointing to a faded entry. "See here, expenditures for special stonework beneath the old keeps and a glass from the Venetian crafters." Substantial sums, yet no visible improvements were recorded. Julian frowned, reading the notations. "This proves nothing beyond unusual expenses." "There's more," Thea said. She reached into a pouch at her belt and withdrew a folded parchment, yellowed with age. "The abbess entrusted me with Lady Eleanor's final letter. It contained specific instructions for accessing what she called the winter kitchen." Julian took the parchment carefully, noting the broken seal, his family's raven impressed in wax. The handwriting inside was elegant but firm, written with the confidence of command. "To the Abbess of Northcross," he read aloud, "I entrust this knowledge should Ravenhold face dire need in years to come. Beneath the old kitchen hearth lies the entrance to my winter stores, a chamber built to sustain life when death stalks the land. The key is held in stone, where ravens gather but never fly." He looked up, confusion evident. "This is a riddle, not directions." Lady Eleanor was cautious, Thea explained. "The letter continues with instructions meant for someone familiar with Ravenhold's oldest sections." Julian studied her with renewed suspicion. "Yet you claim to understand them." "The abbess prepared me before my journey." Lady Eleanor's earlier letters contained more explicit details. Brother Thomas cleared his throat. "The old kitchen, my lord, not the one currently in use, but the original one in the eastern tower. It hasn't been used since your grandfather expanded the castle." Julian considered this information, weighing his instinctive caution against the desperate needs of his people. If there was even a small chance that Ravenhold harbored resources unknown to him. "Very well," he decided. "We'll investigate this old kitchen. Brother Thomas, bring those ledgers. Mistress Atwood, I hope your journey proves worthwhile for both our sakes." The eastern tower stood apart from the main castle complex, connected by a covered walkway that was rarely used. As they crossed through the snow-dusted passage, Julian noted how the stonework changed, newer, more refined masonry giving way to the rougher construction of Ravenhold's original fortress. The tower's lower level had been abandoned to storage decades ago. Broken furniture, rotted tapestries, and forgotten trunks crowded the circular chamber. A massive hearth dominated one wall, its opening large enough for a man to stand inside. "This was once the heart of Ravenhold," Brother Thomas explained, holding his lantern higher. "Before your grandfather's time, all meals were prepared here." Julian approached the hearth, running his hand along the blackened stone. "What am I looking for?" Thea moved beside him, studying the intricate carvings that adorned the mantelpiece. Lady Eleanor's letter mentioned ravens that gather but never fly. She pointed to a series of small bird figures carved into the stone lintel. "There are 7 ravens in flight, but this 8th one is perched, unmoving." Julian examined the carving she indicated. Indeed, unlike its companions, this raven sat with folded wings upon what appeared to be a small ledge. He pressed his fingers against it experimentally, feeling the stone shift slightly under pressure. "It moves," he murmured, applying more force. The stone bird depressed into the mantel with a grinding sound, and somewhere within the chimney, ancient mechanisms groaned to life. The back wall of the hearth shuddered, then slowly swung inward, revealing a narrow passageway descending into darkness. "God's blood," Julian whispered, instinctively stepping back. "It's true." Brother Thomas made the sign of the cross. Lady Eleanor's winter kitchen. Thea was already moving forward, taking a lantern from the monk. "We should proceed carefully. These passages haven't been opened in decades." Julian recovered his composure and took the lead, ducking to enter the low passageway. Steep stone stairs spiraled downward, the air growing noticeably cooler with each step. The walls were damp but solidly constructed, showing none of the decay he would have expected after so many years of abandonment. After descending what felt like the height of the tower itself, the stairs ended at another door, this one made of thick oak banded with iron. A heavy lock secured it, but the keyhole was unusual, shaped like a small bird in flight. "The key is held in stone," Julian recalled from the letter. Thea nodded, reaching back toward the staircase wall. "The raven that doesn't fly holds the key to the chamber." She ran her fingers along the stones until she found a loose block, which she carefully removed. Inside the hollow space behind it was a small iron key, its handle worked into the shape of a raven. The lock turned smoothly despite its age, and the door swung open with surprising ease. The chamber beyond stole the breath from Julian's lungs. It was a vast room, far larger than seemed possible beneath the tower. Stone channels divided the floor into sections, each filled with dark soil from which grew various plants, herbs, winter vegetables, even small fruit-bearing bushes. Glass panels set into the ceiling far above allowed weak daylight to filter down, while clever arrangements of mirrors amplified and directed the light. Along one wall stood racks of preserved foodstuffs, jars of honey, dried fruits, and cured meats hanging from hooks. Another section contained barrels that Julian suspected held grain or perhaps the acorn flour Thea had demonstrated. A small stream had been diverted to flow through channels in the floor, providing fresh water and irrigation. "Impossible," Julian breathed, moving further into the chamber. How could this exist without anyone knowing? Lady Eleanor was remarkably resourceful, Thea said, examining the growing plants with obvious appreciation. The design uses principles from Roman bathhouses to maintain temperature, and the glass ceiling is positioned to capture maximum sunlight during winter months. "This would feed dozens, perhaps hundreds," Brother Thomas said in awe, examining the preserved stores. "And these plants, they grow without summer's warmth." Julian turned to Thea, a new respect in his gaze. "You knew this was here all along." She nodded, a hint of defiance in her expression. "The Abba sent me because famine threatens not just Ravenhold but all the surrounding lands. Lady Eleanor created this chamber as insurance against such times, with instructions that knowledge of it should be shared only when truly needed. But why keep it secret at all? This could have saved lives before now." Thea's expression softened. Lady Eleanor wrote that abundance breeds waste, and knowledge of endless stores would lead to carelessness. She believed hardship sharpened wisdom, but she couldn't bear the thought of her family or people starving when prevention was possible. She gestured around the chamber. This was meant to be opened only in direst need, then resealed and replenished afterward. Julian walked the perimeter of the room, examining its construction with newfound admiration for his great-grandmother's foresight. "We'll need to inventory everything, determine how best to distribute these resources." He paused by a small wooden table where parchment and ink sat waiting, preserved like everything else in the dry, cool air. "And learn how to maintain this place for future generations." In the days that followed, Julian worked closely with Thea to understand the hidden kitchen's operation. The chamber proved even more ingenious than first apparent. A ventilation system kept the air fresh, while the diverted stream not only watered the plants but powered small mechanisms that regulated temperature throughout the space. They established a careful rationing system, ensuring the hidden stores supplemented rather than replaced the castle's regular provisions. The blend of acorn flour with wheat became standard practice, extending their supply significantly. Most importantly, food began flowing again to the surrounding villages, preventing further deaths from hunger. Throughout these efforts, Julian found himself increasingly drawn to Thea's company. Her knowledge extended beyond mere food preservation. She understood crop rotation, animal husbandry, and medicinal herbs with an expertise that seemed beyond what an abbey education might provide. "You speak of farming as if you've worked the land yourself," he remarked one evening as they catalogued the remaining stores. "Yet your hands are those of a worker while your speech is that of a noblewoman." I find myself curious about who you were before Northcross. Thea's hand stilled over the ledger where she had been recording figures. My father was a minor lord in the eastern counties, she said after a pause. He had land but little else. When blight took our crops 3 years running, he couldn't pay his debts. Her voice remained steady, but Julian noticed how tightly she gripped her quill. I learned about hunger then, and about how quickly fortunes can change. How did you come to Northcross? My father arranged a marriage to settle his debts, to a man thrice my age who had buried 3 wives already. A bitter smile crossed her lips. I chose the abbey instead. The abbess accepted my service, though I brought no dowry. Julian studied her face in the lantern light, seeing the strength that hardship had forged. And now you use that knowledge to save others from similar fate. We all serve as we can, she replied, returning to her ledger. Ravenhold is fortunate to have had Lady Eleanor's foresight. As winter deepened, the hidden kitchen became Thea's domain. She taught the castle's cooks how to prepare the unfamiliar ingredients, showing them techniques for stretching meager supplies into nourishing meals. Under her guidance, the winter root vegetables flourishing in the underground garden became staples rather than desperate measures. Word of Ravenhold's mysterious resilience spread through the countryside. When neighboring lords sent envoys to discover Julian's secret, he offered hospitality but kept the hidden kitchen's existence private, sharing only Thea's techniques for extending flour with acorn meal and preserving vegetables. Lord Haverford visited personally, his daughter in tow. The alliance he had hoped to forge through marriage now seemed less essential to Julian, who received them politely but without encouragement. The once tempting offer of Haverford's fertile lands paled beside the security Lady Eleanor's foresight had provided. You've changed, Burwick, Lord Haverford observed as they toured Ravenhold's battlements. There's a confidence about you that was lacking before. Julian smiled diplomatically. Hardship reveals character, my lord. Mine and others. Indeed. Haverford's gaze strayed to where Thea supervised the distribution of bread to villagers in the courtyard below. Your new kitchen mistress seems unusually influential for a servant. Mistress Atwood is not a servant but an advisor, Julian corrected, his tone cooling. Her knowledge has proven invaluable during these difficult months. Haverford raised an eyebrow. Knowledge from Northcross Abbey? I had not realized nuns were so practical in their education. The sisters understand that faith alone doesn't fill hungry bellies, Julian replied. Now, shall we discuss the spring planting? I believe our estates might benefit from coordination this year. After Haverford's departure, Julian found Thea in the hidden kitchen, tending to early seedlings that would be transplanted when spring finally arrived. She worked methodically, her movements efficient and practiced. Watching her, Julian realized how seamlessly she had integrated herself into Ravenhold's life, and into his own daily thoughts. Lord Haverford seemed disappointed to leave without a betrothal, Thea remarked without looking up from her work. His daughter is well dowered, I hear. Julian leaned against the stone wall, arms crossed. Lady Haverford is a perfectly acceptable match by all conventional measures. Yet you sent them away empty-handed. Thea finally glanced up, her expression carefully neutral. The alliance would have secured Ravenhold's prosperity beyond what even this chamber can provide. Perhaps I've developed a taste for unconventional solutions, Julian said, holding her gaze. And for the company of those who value knowledge over land and titles. A faint flush colored Thea's cheeks, but she turned back to her seedlings. The abbess will expect my return once winter breaks. My service here was always meant to be temporary. The thought of Thea's departure created an unexpected hollow feeling in Julian's chest. And if Ravenhold still needs your expertise? The castle staff has learned what I can teach them. Brother Thomas understands the chamber's mechanisms now. Her voice was steady, practical. You'll manage well enough. Julian moved closer, until he stood beside her at the planting table. And if it's not just Ravenhold that would feel your absence? If its lord has grown accustomed to your counsel, and your company? Thea's hand stilled over the dark soil. My lord, she said quietly, you speak of matters that cannot be. I made promises to Northcross. Promises can sometimes be renegotiated, Julian suggested. Especially when circumstances change. What circumstances would those be? Julian chose his words carefully. When I discovered this chamber, I thought Lady Eleanor had provided Ravenhold with its salvation. But I've come to believe the true gift was the knowledge you brought, not just of how to use these resources, but of how to think beyond what's expected and conventional. He paused. I would not lose that wisdom, or the woman who carries it. Thea finally looked up at him directly, her expression a complex mixture of longing and reservation. The abbess released me from full vows when she sent me here. She suspected I might find a different path at Ravenhold. A wiser woman than I realized, Julian said softly. Even so, a kitchen mistress is no suitable match for Ravenhold's lord, Thea pointed out, practical as ever. Your counsel would object. You are no mere kitchen mistress, Thea Atwood. Your father was a lord, however minor, and your service at Northcross only adds to your honor. Julian smiled. Besides, I believe my great-grandmother would approve of the match. She clearly valued resourcefulness over rank. The first genuine smile Julian had seen from Thea slowly blossomed across her face. She was indeed a formidable woman. Her letters spoke often of choosing suitable partners based on character rather than convenience. Then perhaps, Julian said, taking her soil-stained hand in his, we should honor her wisdom in more ways than one. As winter finally released its grip on the land, Ravenhold prepared for a season of renewal. The hidden kitchen had sustained the castle and its dependent villages through the worst of the famine, and now its seedlings would help replant fields left barren by the previous year's failure. Julian and Thea were married as the first crocuses pushed through the melting snow, a simple ceremony that nonetheless drew attendants from across the region. The bride wore a gown of deep blue borrowed from Julian's mother's chests, while wildflowers rather than jewels adorned her hair. Lord Haverford attended with grudging respect, his daughter having since accepted a match with a merchant son who valued her mind over her dowry. Brother Thomas, who performed the ceremony, spoke of fallow seasons and abundant harvests, of how wisdom lay in preparing for both. Lady Eleanor understood that true security comes not from hoarding wealth, he said, but from sharing knowledge and breaking bread together, even when that bread is made with humble acorn flour. The feast that followed featured dishes that would have been unimaginable months earlier, preserves from the hidden stores combined with the first spring greens, creating a meal that honored both prudence and promise. Castle folk and villagers alike shared tables, the rigid divisions of rank temporarily softened by their shared survival of winter's trials. As evening fell, Julian led his bride away from the celebration toward the eastern tower. They descended the now familiar stairs to the hidden kitchen, where lanterns had been lit in anticipation of their visit. I've been thinking, Julian said as they stood amid the flourishing plants, that perhaps this place needn't remain entirely secret. Thea raised an eyebrow. Your great-grandmother was quite specific about discretion. Not complete secrecy, Julian clarified, but careful stewardship. What good is knowledge that dies with us? Lady Eleanor's wisdom saved Ravenhold once, it might save others in times to come. You propose to share the chamber's existence. With selected allies, yes. And to establish similar chambers elsewhere. Julian gestured to the ingenious systems around them. Imagine if every major keep had such resources, how many lives might be spared during future famines. Thea considered this, running her fingers along a row of sprouting herbs. It would require trust. And teaching. Not everyone values foresight when abundance surrounds them. Which is why we begin with those who've known hunger, Julian said. Like the villages that suffered most this winter. We teach them first, then expand as trust is earned. A legacy beyond stone walls, Thea murmured approvingly. Julian took her hands in his. Lady Eleanor created this chamber to preserve Ravenhold's future. I believe that future extends beyond our own walls and bloodline. He smiled. Besides, I discovered I married a woman who excels at teaching practical wisdom. It would be selfish to keep such talents confined to one castle. Then we shall build on Lady Eleanor's foundation, Thea agreed, returning his smile. A network of hidden kitchens throughout the region, ensuring no winter claims the innocent again. Above them, through the glass ceiling panels, stars punctuated the deepening twilight, constant as the cycles of abundance and scarcity, yet offering light even in darkness. Like the chamber itself, they represented both permanence and possibility, a fitting witness to vows of both devotion and duty. As spring strengthened its hold on the land, the hidden kitchen beneath Ravenhold's walls remained a sanctuary of growth and preparation. Just as its concealed existence had preserved life through winter's darkest days, so too would its legacy spread, not as a jealously guarded secret, but as a testament to the enduring power of foresight tempered with compassion. And in this way, the quiet wisdom of a long-dead noblewoman found new expression through her descendants, not merely in blood, but in shared purpose and renewed devotion to the land and people they were bound to protect.